Welcome and thank you for tuning in on Yachting International Radio. My name is Eva Lianne Veldkamp and you are listening to Maritime Unity. Today we will talk with Margarita Amam on how privilege prevents change. Before we start, can you please very shortly introduce yourself so we know who you are?
Yeah, I'm Margarita. I've worked in the yachting, or I'm working in the yachting industry now for closing 18 years. Worked as active crew, served as active crew on board yachts for over 8 years. Before then, I founded my own company for almost 10 years now, which serves, the hospitality segment, the maintenance and operations of it.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for being here. And maybe we can start by telling all the listeners today how we came in connection with each other. Because I think it was on a post for International Women's Day on Instagram by Yachting International Radio. And this post had several slogans that companies use to express their goals towards diversity and inclusion. And can you please explain what your comment was, or do you still remember?
And I've looked it up before. When I was typing it, I was typing it straight out of my heart and head. If you have it in front of you, if you like to quote it, I can then refer to it better. I remember when I saw the Yachting International Radio post, by that time I've seen about 8 or 9 performative International Women's Day posts that had nothing tangible really in it. It felt very repetitive, like they just changed the year and it was just from the other ones before. And that's a bit hollow for something where, people like you and I have even skin in the game. So it just feels a bit disrespectful to just brush all over it. And I'm supposed to now applaud the non-effort. That's why at that stage, when I saw the Yachting International Radio post, I felt compelled to then actually comment.
Yeah, and I can totally recognize this because there was so much posts on this day from so many companies who did exactly the same. So I thought that Yachting International Radio was exactly on point with pointing this out. And your reaction just rests with me, but also, so I think it was about, your comment was about the questionability of these like false promises. And also because they were touching on toxic positivity, victim mentality, and avoiding uncomfortable truths. And for me, when I was reading it, I was recognizing the problem, but also was aware that we have differences. And I think it's so important to be aware of this uncomfortable truth, because if you're not aware of what you're actually doing, then you cannot also make it better for people. So it would be great to talk with you about this today, and I hope all of our listeners will enjoy it as well. And if you're listening to this and if you have comments or things you want to share, please do so in the comment section, because then we can even talk more about this.
Yeah, let's just get comfortable together. Because afterwards you'll feel better about it. Like that book that you never return to the library and you feel very guilty and you lost it. It's better to come out with this is what happened and I'm sorry and how can I make up for it? Or it's a relief. It might feel like a little bit of work and discomfort at first, but it's a relief afterwards. Yeah, I'd like anyone to comment on this and share their perspective. Some react quite personal or apprehensive, and this is also a good way then to interact or engage with these people, because their offense that they take, it might be a great opportunity for them to also look inside and see, why did it trigger me? Why do I react so heavily on this? And then we can work towards that. So there's no shame in it if somebody maybe reacts aggressively or dismissive in the comments. I think we can still have a conversation.
Yeah, and I think it would be great to talk about this more, because I think it's so nice, especially on a platform like LinkedIn, by the way, to have such a wide range of people that are present. And it's always nice to listen and see other perspectives, right? You really have to listen to each other. That's the first thing I think you need to agree on, that there's mutual respect for each other. And then it would be so interesting to talk with you about this toxic positivity you mentioned before. Because on the first hand, you see a lot of toxic positivity on LinkedIn, for example, right? Everybody wants to just appear super nice and on their best selves. And because you have your resume beside you and you want to show off the good things you're doing, especially as a company, of course. But can you explain a little bit more or dive a little bit deeper into how this can actually be so toxic for people, what that actually implies?
Yeah, I've noticed it rising really when more and more groups and companies started to address environmentalism and then started to address DEI. Then I noticed, how come you're talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, and there is only white people, white women, but it doesn't matter, you're still white. You complain and criticize when there's a bunch of white men sitting in a circle and you're saying, what is this for a panel selection? And then when you replace them with a whole bunch of white women, then it's suddenly okay, but it's not okay. And then when you address this, then they weaponize different things against you. When you say, hey, this is a bit hypocritical, isn't it? Because it's executing the opposite of what you verbalize, what you stand for. So that's the problem. And that's the definition. And then I've noticed that they say, if you address it like this, you sound so negative. Or if they conflate a critical thought with being negative or pessimistic, which I'm not. I'm very hopeful. If I would be pessimistic, I would use very different language. I would use very different words. And that wouldn't leave a good hair on any one of you guys in that sphere. But I don't do that because I also see good people. And what I see even more is an amazing potential in this industry. But it's not being engaged. And ultimately, it also means that the owners and the asset suffers from it because they don't get the quality. They don't get that clarity. They don't get that +7 star that they supposedly paying for. Yeah, and that is something that I've noticed, that they say you are being negative. While the topic is surely heavy for some, not for all, but for some it's maybe some personal shame, guilt, or a discomfort in another space there. And then I've noticed they use toxic positivity also, not just in the sense that you sound negative, but also to hold you responsible for their emotional reaction. So they say things like, you make me feel bad about this. I don't feel good about this when you talk this way. And make it more light, make it more positive, make it more happy. To which I respond, of course, in one way, first of all, I'm not responsible for your emotions. You're an adult. I'm an adult. And I'm also holding myself accountable for my emotional reaction, which usually I hold back because I know myself and I look at it. Why do I react emotionally? And then I digest it and put it through a filter to not get pass hurt on. I don't want to be bleeding all over people and I got stabbed and all stabbed. But that doesn't really work. It's not the mentality of someone who has been oppressed or went through trauma. And yeah, these are really the two things. They expect you to be responsible and to cater towards their emotions, their emotional reaction and their fragility. And they make you responsible for it sounding negative in their ears. They confuse negativity with critical thinking.
Yeah, and also it sounds like another toxic trait called gaslighting, right?
Yes.
And what I find, so it will just take all responsibility for yourself away from yourself, and you can just stick all of your own comfort onto something or someone else. And I think that's just such a missed chance also, because you have, if you come across something uncomfortable, you also have the chance to just clean it or take it away or make it better or solve it or find a solution or whatever you can do to do something with it.
Some people just lift the carpet and just brush it under. And while the pile gets bigger under the carpet, the mountain, they still then would probably blame the carpet. Or
that's what I mean. Or the process or the environment of the carpet or the house that it is in, but not yourself. And I can understand this in a way. Sometimes make me super angry or sad because it causes so much pain and suffering. But in a way, I can understand it because you can just go on with your comfortable truth. So the other thing I want to talk with you about is about this truth or belief system that you can have. Because I think your belief system creates your reality, right? And most people are cherry picking what would they want to see about the world and about society and about how things work. They're just taking the convenient things and that also reflect to their own belief systems.
Only the nice thing that they like.
Yeah, and then it will create your presentation of reality, but in fact, it's not reality, right? You're just cherry picking it. And an example of this, what I just came across, was a documentary about flat earthers and social psychologists who really dived into what is actually happening with these people. And it turned out that they just liked the connection with each other so much that they wanted to keep this reality that they try to prove over again that the earth is flat, but it's actually not. So when they
disprove themselves, even they disprove. I've seen this one where they disprove themselves. They had a cardboard box with a square and the light, and then across the field, and they said it should be straight up the light going through, and then if the earth was curved, then it wouldn't appear. And he disproved himself in that one video clip, which was, on one hand, you want to laugh, and on the other hand, you also feel a bit sorry that because their world, their belief system just broke down. Most people then still double down and go, reset to the last operating system that in their mind worked. But in reality, it still doesn't work, because facts and reality is what it is. You cannot change it and distort it which way you like. At some point, reality will hit you hard over the head unless you die beforehand. Yeah. So don't know if you want to die ignorant or if you just want to live ignorantly. Both doesn't sound to me like ideal options. At least not for me. Maybe someone else is happy to be in the herd like that. But when cherry picking, I was thinking, they all like to pick the cherries and eat them, but do they do the work of watering them, nurturing the plant, making sure the soil is well, protecting them from the sun, or ensuring that they get enough sun, protecting them against insects? They don't want to do the work, but they want to reap the benefits from it. And that is something that at this stage I am becoming maybe less diplomatic, less caring, because I've noted that tiptoeing around white fragility is not helping any Westerners to become any stronger. And at the moment, I perceive the majority of them as rather weak and fragile. There's others like you or Ria or Tim. They don't conflate themselves with their nationality, nor with that industry they work in. They can distance themselves from it because they can also criticize it. And that's a very healthy mentality. Everyone else I've spoken with, I've noticed that they feel as if I'm saying, you do this and you do that. It's not at all in my language, but they immediately feel it's a personal attack when I'm trying to invite them to engage and, hey, can you maybe open up the topic of DEI? Because when I do, I'm getting clobbered, I'm getting yelled at, even by big industry leaders being yelled at a trade show, shut up and sit down. Where you think, for real? This is the standard? You're a senior leader, a CEO in this industry, and this is how you speak to me. And then everyone else was also being quiet. So when in a normal setting, in a political field, and remember in France, seeing it in the news, African descendant was in the parliament there in France, and he was talking about a subject. And another parliament member said, then go back to where you came from. The instant reaction of everyone around was, you leave this chamber. Now that is the reaction of the society and how it should be, that racism and supremacy shouldn't be still societally acceptable. In Yachting, though, you've noticed that it's still acceptable. So someone is considered as a leader and a senior CEO of a large company to behave this way. So his behavior is acceptable. Me being bullied and mistreated and ugly spoken to is accepted. And everyone else stays quiet because they don't want to be outcast or stand up. When they watch movies, like what's that one movie with the mockingbird and it's 3-4 movies. It's always the same storyline. Yeah. People being oppressed, then they have to fight and rise up against, and then they're all for the resistance, and they're all for the small one who's not being bullied. The one with the they do this symbol like the step. Oh yeah, you mean also about the books. Yeah. With the girl. Oh man. We can leave it first. Put it in the comments. It's also every Disney movie. If you say it like that, it's every Disney movie. Yeah. You have but it's diving into this. We know what is right and wrong. We teach our children the difference between right and wrong. We teach them to be honest. We teach them to stand up for someone who's weak. We teach all this and we've learned all this. But then when it comes to executing it, that's where people then fall short. And that's where you see lots of people having these performative posts, hailing about women, but they haven't even changed much of the wording from the last year and the year before that type of post. Or like we see now in yachting, it's becoming less about diversity, and they refrain. The very first thing that is the difference and what is diversity is not just gender, but it's definitely ethnicity. But you hear it when they counted out diversity and all that stuff, they go first to gender, then they go to sexual orientation, then they go to neurodiversity before they go to ethnicity. And that shows again, the priority is again a list of what are the white priorities.
Yeah, that's so good that you point this out. Oh, sorry. Yeah, it's so good that you point this out and name it like that, because I think it's so insightful to hear this. So I hope a lot of people hear this. And I would love to talk with you in the next episode about this inequality that lies in the basis of what you just said. But just to round things up, the topic of today was how privilege prevents change. And I think you just very accurately pointed that out. So in this respect, what is your advice to people who are now listening? Recognize what you're saying. Oh, wow, this opened up my perspective. I had it when I read your comment. I was like, yes, this is exactly what you mean. By the way, the name
me. So your reaction, you were so open. Yeah, I haven't heard and thought of it this way. Can we talk more about it? Your reaction made me immediately, really? Or are you kidding? Yeah, sure, let's talk. Okay.
Yeah.
Immediately heard, and therefore I've also dropped that. As an ethnic person, you always have some sort of guard where you make sure that not being misunderstood. You try to find the right words that somebody cannot turn them against you, and you have a protective layer because you don't know the intentions. But your comment disarmed me and really let my guard go down to then talk more openly about it. My advice to people would be really try not to take it personal. And I think that's really something that white people need to work the hardest on, because they've gotten so much attention. They've gotten so many resources. They've gained so much through a lot of oppression, through a lot of injustices. These may not come through your hands, but you're the descendants of the people who came from. So don't become a custodian of oppression. Become an abolitionist, or become part of dismantling it instead of protecting it, which means detach yourself from the criticism that goes against the system, because when you cannot even acknowledge it, you can't change something that you don't want to see.
Yeah.
So don't protect it. Help us dismantle it.
Yeah, and in this regard, I think I just came up with a better title for this episode, because instead of saying how privilege prevents change, I think allyship can enable change, right?
Yeah.
So instead of being unequal or privileged or unprivileged or any kind of difference you can see, you can just find common grounds, then be an ally, like you just very accurately pointed out about the French parliament. That should be normal in any case. If you see somebody hurting somebody else, also with words on psychological level, on mental level, on what kind of level that we agreed on that was not nice or that is hurting, then we should just be an ally for this person or this minority or this group. And I think that's so much needed, especially in the world today. And so thank you very much for pointing that out. What do you think? It's a better way to say that allyship?
I like both ways, to be honest. With allyship, I have the same. I obviously think of the people who do that also quite performatively. So to me, allyship means I work, for example, with Lily. She lives in Nairobi in Kenya. An incredible, intelligent, and really sweet person. And when I speak on behalf of ethnic people and every Filipino who has shared their story with me, and I've asked permission from them, can I use your voice without naming you personally, because they want to be protected, because they know the dangers that they would encounter when they would so do it publicly. I've encountered them myself, that people don't want to do business or want to harm my business or want to, in another way, make you not succeed, which is the opposite of allyship. So they may say, hey, well done, you're so brave, to your face, but behind the closed doors, they don't do anything to support you. And allyship means to me that you support someone. Like I would love to revive Grit, which is the company that we have founded to get the DEI course, the training that we've built, Lily and I, to yachting. So for them to better understand communicating across cultures and how to be more diverse and inclusive. It's a great basic training tool for people in management companies as well as on board yachts. If you ask me, the ones in the management companies are in more dire need to train this and to practice this. It's from my experience working on boards and now as a service provider.
Yeah, definitely agree. And very good. You pointed out that the basis of this should be psychological safety. Because if you have negative consequences for speaking up on anything, it's a proof that you are in a psychologically unsafe environment. So that's a good one.
The master. It also shows you who is your master. If you think of yourself as a free and democratic and an intelligent being, why do you choose your master to be money, or your master is maybe that one CEO, like that guy who was so rude, or rude is a very nice way to describe it. If you choose to be quiet on that, then we know now who your master is. Yeah. But I don't want to be your houseboy or your house girl, or like they did with the enslaved, to kidnap people from the African countries where they become so-called house Negroes, or like the Germans did with Jews. They had house Jews, so-called, who did their housework and their chores and all of that, and that's how they saved their skin. So I'm supposed to become your houseboy and your housegirl. You're supposed to be my master. I don't want that. I don't want that fear to dominate and to dictate my behavior. And they were all, the majority of them, I think, were surprised and then in shock and scared immediately. And there was a couple of people, you heard 2 or 3 people applauding, agreeing with him fully with that behavior, which shows, not just how unsafe the environment is for you to voice your opinion. It also shows that you may be too fragile to consider yourself a leader or a spokesperson in any way. Because in a moment where courage is required and standing up is required, you were not there. You were physically attending, but you were not there. So at the moment, I can't take any of those posts or people any serious anymore because they lost the authority and my belief and my hope in them to speak on the subject with any merit.
Yeah. It needs to be.
Important point. And what I wanted to add to the topic of allyship also means that even I step out of the way when it comes to the subjects of how African descendants are treated and what access or non-access they are given. Like we can see from South Africa, why is only white crew being employed while the majority of hotel staff and people who have actually come through a commercial and traditional education of hospitality are predominantly Black or brown people in South Africa themselves. When you ask the recruitment companies, they say because they're not getting hired. When you ask the management companies, they say because owners don't want it. I worked for owners who had islands and private houses in the Caribbean and in Asian parts of the world where only locals worked and maybe 1 or 2 white people were there. And they were sweet and kind and caring, physically hugging them for New Year's and all these things. So it doesn't necessarily look to me that it's the owners who decide on in a homogeneous group of crew. It seems more as it's lying within, I'm not making any friends here, it lies within the management companies and in the sphere of management and representatives rather than owners or crew.
It sounds to me, because I'm not really into the yachting management world, but it sounds to me so like a little bit of an outstander.
Yeah.
That the basic line here is removing yourself a little bit from what actually happens, and then having such differences in the privilege things, such differences in equality. And I think you just, in the end, it really sounds like people are not in touch with each other, with themselves, with what is even acceptable or what is even happening. And I think then it's so easy to just point to someone else or something else. What we talked about in the beginning, that you just gaslight everything and everyone around you. And that's the easy shortcut to every kind of solution. But the solution is not real, right? It's not a real solution.
It's lipstick on a pig, and then we're all supposed to go, shit, go, Jerry. That your daughter.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. So I think in the end, it would be really nice to stop, to stop the blame culture. Name it like I don't know. Maybe you should come up with a name for it. Call it reality. Because I think it's not about... it's not about guilt. If you did something criminal, then it is about guilt, because then you did something
at certain stages as well, without it maybe being criminal, or not that I noticed that I did something criminal. But yeah, I feel guilty, for example, if I have been very critical on something, or if I may have not noticed early enough that this person is maybe overloaded, or that it was too much for them, or these things made me feel a little bit guilty. I also feel guilty. And that's why I feel better when I harm my own business and myself. And when I use the privilege of being safe, being born in Germany, being educated here, being able to express it in English and in German, and really defend not just my point, but also make them think about it harder, as in they're losing the debate. And that's just fair enough. But I need to use this privilege, because otherwise I feel guilty of having it. I don't deserve all those freedoms if I don't use it to help someone else to also gain access to those freedoms. And that's why another saying that has never left my mind is, if you're not hungry for privilege, it's because you're too... if you're not hungry for justice, you're too full of privilege. And
that's a good one. Yeah.
That should really we should be reminding ourselves of it all the time. Why am I not touched by it? It doesn't mean like people then jump to the other extreme. Oh, then I should be living in the woods and be doing NGO work all the time. Nobody asked you to become a monk. We only asked you to make a difference in the field that you are active in.
Exactly. And you can start small. Every step is more than welcome. And I think in the end, it's just about bringing awareness on this. Because it's not... So the guilt part comes in, I think, when... you start being aware of what you did that might hurt somebody else. But this is not a bad thing, because then you still have an option to change your behavior, or to ask what's going on. Oh, I did something that hurt you. What was it? Because I would like to improve it, because I don't want to hurt you, like with my conscience. So being aware of each other and being conscious about what you can improve, I think, will be really helpful. So thank you so much for talking about this today, together with me on Yachting International Radio. I'm really looking forward to diving more into these subjects together with you. And to all of you who are listening today, thank you so much for listening, and I hope you will join us the next time.